Welcome back to another episode of the Be Who You Came to Be podcast. I'm your host, Tara Renze, and I have to tell you, I am so excited about today's podcast, which we are doing as an honor to International Women's Day, to Women's History Month. And I just couldn't think of a better person to have on than a colleague, a friend of mine, Gail Davis, who works in the speaking industry, who has a really incredible and inspiring, a remarkable story. A female entrepreneur, a woman in business who just celebrated 25 years. Gail Davis, welcome to the show.
Hello, Tara. How much fun. I can't believe they call this work. This is
I
great.
know, right? I can't believe they call it work either. That's how I feel about this business most days. Some days,
Me too.
some days it's a
Yeah,
lot of work, but for the most part, it's one of those pinch me things where I'm like, do I really get to do this for my job?
I know. I agree totally.
Yeah. So take us back. So just so everybody knows, in case this is the first time you've ever listened to this show, I'm Tara Renze. I am an author and a keynote speaker, and Gail owns a speakers bureau. So she actually books speakers like me for keynotes and for events across the world. And so we have a lot of synergies. We've worked together for a while now. And in fact, your GDA was my top booked bureau last year.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
we've
made
gotten
a,
such great feedback on you, Tara. It's really
oh,
great. It's really
We had an
great.
awesome event, just last week in, where was I?
Iowa?
I was in Virginia Beach, got a standing
Oh,
ovation,
okay.
and it was a great event. I will
I
s
love it.
GDA, one of the things, and we're gonna get into the whole story, but I just have to say up front is when I do a GDA event, I just know it's gonna be a home run. I know it's gonna be a slam dunk because you and the agents there are so good at matching the right speaker with the right audience. And, there have been a few times, not a ton of times, where I've done an event and I felt like Eminem at a retirement community. I was like, "What the hell was that?" Like, I was not the right person for that stage. And that's something that you guys do so well, you ladies, that I just know. I'm like, I always so psyched for a GDA event because I'm like, "This is gonna be fun."
I love that. It's a lot of fun. And I think, there were lots of different models when I got into this. And that exclusive roster model completely existed. And so we took a different approach and we're very, very client centric. And I think that's what you're referring to. We really try to get to know the client frontwards, forwards, and backwards. We try to get a seat at the table and be an equal partner. So when you take that approach, it makes it easier, I think, to find the right speaker for the right event.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when you know all the speakers so well. So let's take a little trip down memory lane
Ooh, I
back to
love
the
it.
90s and how you all got started, because this is a really really fun story. You were in the 90s. You were working in corporate America. You had a super successful job and you planned events.
Correct, correct. Yes, I worked for a company called EDS, which is short for Electronic Data Systems. It was a company founded by Ross Perot, and I worked there for 20 years. So I did a variety of things. I was a corporate recruiter, I was in the corporate training department. And after my first son was born, a mentor called me and he said, "Hey, there's an opportunity over in the events department. That should be easy while you're raising your children."
Yeah.
Clearly, he didn't know diddly squat about large scale events, but I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and I went and I interviewed internally for this job and I got it. And believe it or not, I only planned one event a year. That's how large it was. And it was called Inner Circle. And it was our top sales recognition event. And I was responsible for everything: the site selection, the awards, the agenda, the gifts, you name it, the
It's like
whole
planning a
package.
wedding.
It is. It is 100% like that. Yes. And so I don't know how many years I did that. I think maybe 10 years. And I really did mold it. I know you talk a lot on your show about being a working mom and how you juggle career demands with family demands, and I figured it out. So anytime I went in the summer on a site inspection to Hawaii, I took my entire family, often my parents to help watch the kids, or my kids went as they got older and they would do all the optional activities with me. And so I figured out how to kind of make them a part of it. But that last 10 years, that event was our signature event. And it was one of those where every year when it was over, people, their line was always the same: how are you ever going to top this next year?
Right.
you know, always. So specifically, it was in 1994, and we were at Turnberry Isle, and it was the final night, and we were at a staff party, and the chairman of the company came in to say thank you to my team for all the work they had done all week, and he went outside on the veranda, and I went out to check on him, and I said, "Everything okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, but I'm just thinking, like, who are we going to get as our keynote speaker next year?" And I love to tell people that story because can you imagine the CEO of a Fortune 100 company really thinks that much about keynote speakers? But he did. And I
Right.
was like, well, we're going to Hawaii, but I don't know who the speakers are yet. Why do you bring it up? And he said, because I get so tired of the same old, same old. At the end of the year, I will have heard Margaret Thatcher, Colin Powell, Schwarzkopf so many times. I want somebody new and different, someone everyone would like to hear, but no one's heard, and they need to be global in their appeal. I was like, okay. So I go home. It's a Friday night. We're getting pizza. We go into the video store. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah,
All
Blockbuster.
the, yeah,
I'm
all the,
I'm for the record, I miss Blockbuster. That was fun as hell. And do you remember though how you'd be spying a video and you'd have to go swoop it off the shelf before someone else grabbed the last one?
yes.
I mean,
So
those
they were organized alphabetically, and I'm a rule follower. So I go over to the A's and I start looking, and I see the movie Alive.
Oh,
And I
yes.
wanted to see it in the theater, but it was only in the theater for like 5 minutes. So I was like, like you said, I swooped it off. And my former husband was a Spanish linguistics major. We had actually met in Mexico City. So he was like, "Yeah, I want to see that." So we go home and we start watching it, and he knew this story. He knew I was looking for someone that everyone would want to hear, but no one had heard, who was global in their appeal. And he's like, "You should get that guy for Inner Circle." And I'm like, "Ethan Hawke?" And he's like, "No, not Ethan Hawke, like the real guy." And I'm like, "You should stick to mergers and acquisitions. I'll
Yeah.
handle the events." But by the end of the movie, I'm like, "This is the best idea I've ever heard." And it's a long, crazy story that I love to tell, but let's just suffice it to say I reach out to all these bureaus. They tell me it's a bad idea because just because a movie is made about someone doesn't make him a good speaker. Just because someone writes them a book doesn't make him a good speaker. But
And weren't people like, "I think he might be dead."
yeah, someone did say that. Well, I reached out to all these bureaus and I was like, if you can help me find this guy, I'll give you all of our business. At the end of the day, my dad had been to an event in Dallas and he had met the ambassador from Uruguay, and he made that connection for me, which is just crazy considering I'm from a very small town in Oklahoma. And I reached out to Nando Parado, who now is the most book speaker in all of GDA history. And first, he told me no. He's like, "I don't have any interest in speaking for you. That was a horrible experience. I've only spoken to an organization that I'm a member of." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "YPO." And I have a long history with YPO. I have a lot of respect for the quality of events they do. And anyway, one thing leads to another. I send him stuff, and he comes and he speaks, and it was so powerful. And 2 weeks later, I went to Uruguay with my entire family, including my parents. We became fast friends. I quit my job where I'd worked for 20 years
Oh my
and thought I
gosh.
would just start this little hobby in my office, and I would represent one speaker.
Yeah. Oh
And
my
yeah,
gosh. So for everyone who doesn't know, the Alive story and then the movie, what's the
Society of the Snow.
Society of the Snow, that by the way, I have seen both. Society of the Snow was way better.
Yeah. Well, there was I mean, it's modern movie making technology, I think. J.A.
Yeah.
Bayona. And he gave a voice to those who didn't make it,
Yeah. It
which
was it was sad
is
but beautiful but
beautiful.
inspiring, and like, I mean, it is such a story that they survived. I
The
mean,
cinematography when he would be up close and they would have conversation, and then he would pull back and you would see that they were this tiny speck on this all white
yes.
mountain. It's a miracle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because so many people were like, "Why didn't they get up and leave?" And you're like, "You don't realize there was nowhere to go."
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so I actually I was reading as I was reading the story, and I've known this, but I really did, some extra research before I was like, okay, so then Gail has like a Jerry Maguire moment. You're like, you've got one client and you're like, I'm going to start my own thing. Like, who's going with me? And you had, did you have a goldfish too? I mean, it's a true Jerry Maguire moment.
It really was. And it's so funny because, well, I mean,
Well, what
I
did
you know,
was your company like, "Congratulations, we're excited for you," or were they really like then like, "Oh, damn, how are we ever gonna have another event without Gail?"
no, I had a great team and no, I mean all the timing kind of worked out. There were some super high senior level leadership changes at EDS, and so it probably was a good time. I was one of the first women who really pioneered a lot of different concepts like telecommuting. That's what they used to call working from home.
Oh,
And everybody knew
telecommuting.
that I had really struggled with, I didn't want to be an all in executive. I wanted to somehow blend my talents and be available to my kids. So I think
Yes.
everybody really supported the fact that I was going to be able to do this, be right by the middle school and the high school, and be fully present for my kids.
Good for you.
I
How
guess
old were the boys
I
then?
was trying to think. They were probably like 8 and 9.
Oh my gosh,
So
that's like almost
I got to be local for middle school and high school.
okay, that's about what my boys were when I decided to go out doing speaking, and, I
Mhm.
think it is, we can talk about women in business, until we're blue in the face, but I think
Yeah.
that that is what so many women want is flexibility so that we don't have to choose that and we shouldn't have to choose like right I mean we should be able to have flexibility and so many women I think do go out and create their own opportunities because we've come a long way since telecommuting but even then I feel like it's hard to strike that balance and more companies are doing a great job of getting creative with their these women who are such value assets to the organization and to the culture and to the innovation and to the creativity and I think just the love that happens within organizations. I mean women play such an important role in that. um, so I have seen more and more companies do job shares and figure out ways to keep those women engaged. But you have a whole roster and organization of working women.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It never was by design that I was only going to, hire women because I've hired my fair share of men, and I get a lot of, questions from people like, why aren't there any guys there? But let's face it, the majority of speakers are male, as you know,
Yes.
and our IT guy is a male. And my boys grew up working here, carrying out the trash, mailing FedExes. But it just started to work out that way. I mean, and I just have this amazing group of hardworking women, and I try to always channel back to when I was their age and I was trying to sort things out and have a family and juggle life. And I know that if you give someone flexibility, you gain a lot of loyalty in return. And I remember, I don't know what year it was, but several years ago, I was convinced to go to unlimited PTO or discretionary PTO, I think we call it, which basically, after I believe it's a year, you can take as much time off as you want. And the old EDS Gale was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster. People are going to
Right.
be off all the time. Well, I just ran a report for last year, and out of my mouth came these words: please talk to this person and this person. They didn't even they didn't even take a week last year. They need to take more. It's important to work life balance. And ironically, the person that took the most days off last year was our highest performing salesperson. So
Yeah.
what does that tell you?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I do and, I feel like women specifically gained a lot of equity during the pandemic because it was proof that, like, we don't need to be in the office all day. Like, we are GSD, get shit done type people. Like, you want someone to get stuff done, like, ask a working mom, ask a working woman, like, she's gonna get it done, and it's not about doing it within a certain hour, between 8 and 5, but, like, just you hired me because I'm capable and I bring a lot to the table, like, let me do my job. So good for you. But I can imagine from running, I used to run sales offices, like, we had a pretty flexible PTO schedule, that always actually ended up biting us when people would leave the organization because we owed them, like, months of PTO. But it was kind of the same thing. It was like, "Hey, if you've built up, the trust and that you're kicking ass and you're doing your job, like, take the afternoon off, like, I don't care." leave
Yes.
at 1.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So, okay, so you decided, did you know then that you wanted to get into like bureauing events and finding speakers for different events? Or were you gonna like start your own roster? Like, what was your plan when you Jerry Maguired
It
with one
a
client?
very good plan. It truly was the one person thing. In full transparency, and I don't always go into this because it's like yesterday's news, but I was married at the time. So I had this like safety net, and
Right.
so I was basically just gonna represent Nando. And then Nando informed me, well, I don't really want to speak that much. And I was like, oh. And he was like I would never speak more than 6 times a year. And I remember Kelly saying, this is not a really good business plan. And then I realized it really wasn't a very good business plan because I would develop the rapport with someone and they'd book Nando and they'd love him and I didn't have any other tricks in my bag.
Right.
So that wasn't good. Or I would build a bond with someone, I would pitch Nando and he wasn't a fit. And then I built this relationship and I didn't have any other place to go. So I just slowly started thinking of the different speakers I knew and calling them. I mean, I can't even believe that I had a 3-ring binder and I had a page on Mondo.
Were you like going to the library and trying to find, because what, let's face it, I mean, this was
No.
early stages of the internet, and I guarantee
Mhm.
you there were like no speaker websites. Like,
Right.
I
No.
mean,
I knew I'd worked with Rory Firestone, I'd worked with Tom Sullivan. I mean, I just kind of started networking and calling people and um, adding people. And I mean, it just like, I honestly don't even remember when it exploded. I just know that one day I had one speaker, and then I woke up one day and I remember on the website I used to say, and we represent over 100 people, and I thought that was so cool. And then I remember when I changed it to 500, and I thought it was cool, and 1,000. And then one time I was updating the website to say something like, we represent over 2,500 speakers. And I kind of caught myself. I was like, ew, I don't even like the way that sounds. I can't possibly know 2,500 speakers. Like, this isn't who I ever set out to be. So I came in and I said, we're going to triage these speakers because it's too many and we need focus. So I came up with this nomenclature that we would have high priority speakers, radar speakers, and low priority speakers. So we set the criteria that a high priority speaker, which you are, is someone that we booked, we had a positive experience with working with them and feedback from the client, and they meet our economic model. So that became this limited number, and that those were the curated speakers that I could talk about without any notes. It was very, very easy to place them and to sell them. And I probably went through a phase where I thought that's the only people we should book because we already knew them. So why should we risk trying something new? Which,
right.
at one point, good people who work around me were like, that's going to be the kiss of death if you do that. And I'm like, oh, you're right. So then we started leaning into radar. And our criteria for radar would be like, let's say when I first met you and I just really liked you and I saw you on stage, but we had never booked you. So you would be a radar speaker. Or worst case, this is a horrible way, but it's important. Let's say we're pitching to a client and they say, you know what, we're not going to go with your options. We're like, what? And do you mind telling us who you went with? Yes, we went with Tara Renze. And then we're like,
Right.
well, who the hell is that? And so that's the way you become a radar because we lost business to you. Or we have a long term client. She goes to another conference, calls us, and says, oh my gosh, have you heard of Tara? I was just at such and such conference and I saw her speak. So we started putting a lot of emphasis and focus and understanding on these radar speakers. And then there's a whole bunch of speakers that just, I mean, I'm sure they're great. And considering my origin story, where I went after an unknown, changed my life, created a company, and stand here today, he's our most booked speaker. It's hard for me not to love every speaker I ever meet. But the truth of the matter is, you've got to have focus. So we focus on our high priority, we focus on the radar, and I'm sure there's some great speakers in low priority that we're missing out on, but you can't be all things to everybody.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, let's face it, the speaking industry just in the last 4 years has exploded. I feel like with speakers and experts and there's I mean, I just am constantly I mean, I do feel like there's these household names, like there's the speakers that a lot like we know who they are, but there's so many new up and coming speakers and I think that one of the when people ask just about even my and getting into the industry, they're like, "Well, how long have you been speaking?" I mean, the truth was I was speaking when I was at corporate. I was speaking when I was in my social selling. Like I was a theater and voice major for 2 years in college. So like being on stages was always really natural for me. But I mean, I've been developing my message since 2018 when I decided and that was after I had like had social proof of my message for almost a decade. But there's really no such thing as an overnight success story in this business. And it just takes a lot of time and a lot of social proof. And, you have to be willing. I think that for me, it was in the heart of the pandemic when, we didn't know if there was going to be another stage. And I'd love to talk to you about your perspective during that time because it had to have been scary as hell as a business owner. I mean, I was a business owner, but you are also having every speaker on the face of the earth call you in the meantime, be like, "Hey, Gail, what's going on in the industry?" And you're like, "I have no idea." But it was at that point in time for me that was like my vision of what I needed to be doing and who I came to be was this speaker who had this message that I saw change lives and I knew so many people needed it that at that point in time it was like this is what I'm doing. Like I can't imagine doing anything else. I mean if I had to, I could, but this was like so specific of my calling. And I think you have to have that much determination and belief in your message to make it in this business.
Yeah, that was a rough time, the pandemic, because every conversation with a client was very negative in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, not every, but for years people have been signing contracts that had force majeure language. They didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it meant. I mean, we all just signed it. And then all of a sudden, if you're going to survive, you have to understand what that contract says. And the contract says, it doesn't release you from your obligation, it just suspends it. And
Right.
so you're saying to people, we're just going to have to hold out, we're going to have to reschedule this thing. And some people would try to, you know I mean, they were fighting for their survival. We're a nonprofit, we're trying to save the lives of children, you can't keep our money.
Right.
Oh, it was just, and
But then you had
every,
contracts with the speakers. I think that's what a
yeah.
lot of people don't understand. It was a
And I
messy
have to
time.
tell you, there were some speakers that did some beautiful things. Beautiful. There were speakers that would call just to check in on me. There was one speaker. He's a pretty well known guy, and he was like, "The next time you book me, I want the entire fee to go to you because I know how hard this year is going to be." And I mean, but he
Yeah.
was like, "All these years you've been booking me, and I'm getting the bulk of the fee, and you're getting very little. The
Yeah.
next one's on me." And then I had one guy, and he's like, "Whatever you are getting ready to pay me," because he spoke a lot, so I probably owed him for like 3 events in say January of 2020. He was like, "Don't even pay me. Just keep that money to keep things afloat." I mean, there were just
Yeah.
so many nice,
Yeah.
and a lot of them. Like if a client got really contentious, like they wanted their money back or they were going to sue, which unfortunately that happened a handful of times. Most speakers said, "Life's too short. Give them their money back. Don't worry about it."
Yeah, I
So,
did. I didn't take money from any of my contracts. I just was like, "Hey, we're all in this together." And the last thing I want is someone's money. Like I'm just like that. Like I don't even
yeah,
like to borrow money for
me
whatever,
either.
you know? So the last thing I was going to do was be like, "You're going to go get my money, damn it," you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I've never had a bad experience with that in this business. There was even a time, I think it was 2 years ago where I had a gig and they had bought books, they had bought necklaces, they had booked me to come speak and then their company went bankrupt and they actually paid out my contract.
Wow.
I mean, they gifted all the stuff that they had bought, but I was just like, "Oh my gosh," like, and I would have never expected that,
Yeah, I
but
wouldn't either.
they did the right thing, I
That's
guess
nice.
so, but Anyway, well, we survived,
We
and
survived it.
now I feel like the business is, like, booming and better than ever, and people are realizing that. I mean, let's just talk about the power of events. People coming together. We realize there's so much power in a room where people are connecting on so many levels, and then just the belief in each other. And I was thinking about this. I would love to know, do you know how many, I'm sure you have to know, how many events GDA has booked?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can find out. We can add it to the show notes. I mean, I would say on average, we do average 300 a year. Okay,
Right.
so whatever, what's that, 300 times 25? That's probably 7,500 events.
I mean, and then you have to think about the
And
lives,
then,
the people in the
oh,
room who've had their
that,
lives changed because you brought a speaker in that spoke to someone that, I mean, and it's true, like, saved a life, changed a life, gave someone their confidence back. I mean, just the notes I get, of, like, people saying, "You changed my life," or, like, "I felt like this was just for me," or "You spoke to me on a day I was losing my heart," or, I mean, I get these messages. I mean, I have had a message that was like, I talked someone out of suicide because of your message. And think about you, Gail. Like, you got to think about the 7,500 times, however many people, and the trajectory of. And I think that so many times people, when they hear like, "Oh, you're a speaker or you're in events or whatever," I don't think they really get to, like, the truth of, like, why people do these events, which is personal and professional development. Which
100%.
every time we work on ourselves, everything else in life gets better.
That's right. Yeah. It is. I mean, I think you said you referenced it earlier, but honestly, I would do this if I won the lotto tomorrow. I mean, I might take one quick little fun trip, but at the end of the day, I'd be back here
Yeah.
because everybody we work with is so great. You know, clients, companies aren't bringing speakers in if they're struggling. So most of the organizations are doing well, and most of them have a culture that values professional development on some level, or they wouldn't be bringing in outside speakers. And they don't enter into contracts without the ability to pay for them. So, I never have huge AR issues. Speakers are nice. If they're not, they're never going to get booked. So it really is fun.
It
And
is.
then it's rewarding, as you said. I love to be on site with a speaker and listen to what people say when they come up, and it's just a warm and fuzzy feeling to
Yeah.
know that you've really changed someone's life.
Yeah. Well, I just posted about this on LinkedIn and I get, like, emotional thinking about it, but I've realized that every time I leave stage and I'm around people and you're around a lot of people, that there's so many people in the world who need positive messages and who need personal and professional development, who don't feel like they're enough. They don't feel like they matter. They don't feel like they're making an impact. And I think it makes me so sad to know that there's so many people out there struggling with their self-limiting beliefs, wondering, do I matter? And then they come to an event where their company or an association, or maybe they've invested to get themselves to an event, and they hear a speaker who was strategically aligned through a bureau or whoever it was to be like, "Hey, we want our people to have this message," and it gave them that spark back. I mean, that is, like, you can't even put a price tag on that. And I've had it done to me where I've been in the audience and I'm like, "Holy shit, like, everything's changing just in this 1 hour for me."
It happened to me in January, and it was Simon Sinek, and he was talking about sales. And he said something that has just, I mean, you never get too old to learn, and you never get too old to change. But he was talking about how, yes, if you're a sales leader or you're a business owner, you have to have monthly goals. You're going to love this because you used to manage sales teams. You have to have quarterly goals, you have to have annual goals. But a goal is just a date on a calendar. February happened to have 28 days. Whose fault is that? Nobody's. So if somebody didn't make the February mark, are they doing all the things right? Did they have enough proposals in play? What have they got in the pipeline? If February had had 32 days, would they have made their goal? And if so, there's not a problem, you know?
Right.
And I think I used to be a little too, you didn't meet the goal. I
Yeah.
mean, I was a little too, I put the book in right on the date. And so the way he explained that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so, I mean, it's so obvious. But to your point, I still sit in the audience and I still am impacted after all the speakers that I've listened to all these years. I
Yeah.
still take notes and walk away and go, I can do that differently. I can do that better. Or I want to use that with my kids. You know, today I was on a Zoom with James Clear, Atomic Habits, and he said something, and I sent a note to both of my sons. I'm like, you got to think about this. He was talking about how as you get older, you get more and more opportunities. So your threshold and your filter for saying no has to be more discriminating. You can't
Right.
continue to say yes to all the things. And as I watch my boys get older and have obligations, I see them still trying to say yes to everything. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I love it.
that's a great that is I think that is it is true. You get to a certain age and you're like, "Okay, I can't say yes to everything." And then you feel like you're letting people down or,
Right.
whatever it is. I mean, you've just had this gold of getting to learn from so many thought leaders and then just cool stories. So, I would love to know, so you said Simon Sinek was the most thought-provoking recently. Like what is like one of the coolest speakers or messages that you've ever booked or heard? That just always stands out to you of like, that's just such a cool talk to hear.
I love Magic Johnson, and I had a particularly moving experience with him that could never have been scripted. And so I think what I love so much about it is it was one of the most authentic moments I've ever seen in my life. So Magic was at speaking for one of our largest clients, and it was a huge ballroom. You know the type where there's a big section over here, then there's a middle section, there's a
Yep.
big section over there. And we had prepped him backstage that, hey, there's a guy over there, you know, stage left, and he's going to be wearing a Celtics jersey. So just know that. So we had told him that. So sure enough, Magic comes out and he's doing his thing, and then he sees that jersey, and he jumps off the stage and he goes down there and really interacts with the guy. It's super funny. And then he just continues to interact with different people in the audience, and, you know, taking selfies. He's just having a lot of fun. And then this is what happened, and it's so magic. But he all of a sudden he talks, he's thinking out loud, and he goes, I'm sure I'm spending a lot of time over here. I need to see what's going on over here. And he whisked right past the center aisle, and now he's on the far stage right.
Right.
And on the front row, nobody told him this. Nobody. He sees this guy and he's like, wow, you're tall, stand up. And the guy stands up and he's about the same height as Magic. And he said, did you play ball? And the guy can hardly talk. He is meeting his hero.
Yeah,
And
starstruck.
it's an international sales conference. I think this guy was like from Germany. I'm almost positive. And I think he might have even played on the Olympic team or something. But he cannot speak, and he just can't speak. And later I hear the backstory that the minute the doors opened, he rushed to the front. All he wanted was to see Magic Johnson. He never dreamed he and Magic Johnson were going to have a conversation.
Right.
But what happened is Magic got so overwhelmed by this interaction. So
Oh.
Magic tears up. He goes up to the stage, he turns around, and he turns back and he goes, man, I used to have heroes. I used to watch him on TV, and I thought if I ever get to meet him. And now to think that this guy came here from another country and he feels that way about me, wow, that's overwhelming. And I'm telling you, that client is still telling that story because it was so incredible. And I loved it because it was so real. You know,
And
and Magic Johnson's a big celebrity and he could
yeah.
easily dial it in and tell the same stories every time. But he was so fully present that he really turned that into a true legend of a moment. I mean, that
Yeah.
had to be 7 years ago, and the client's still talking about
That's
it.
just so beautiful. And the fact that he was so emotionally moved and just
Yes.
and took the time in front of everyone to have that humble moment
Mm-hmm.
just says, so much about him and who he is. So,
Yeah.
okay, so
Well,
I have another question for you. You can book anyone. Let's say, I mean, you could book anyone alive. So let's make them like they would have to be like a past person that you would have been like, "Oh my god, if I could have ever booked this speaker." Do you have someone that you think of that you were like, "Oh, if I could book them, I would."
yes. I mean, everybody wants Oprah.
Yeah.
And one of the things I taught my children when I was raising them, and I teach my team, is let's not use absolutes. We can't say always and we can't say never. You got to couch these things. So one would say Oprah rarely accepts speaking engagements. But
Right.
lo and behold, if there wasn't a little nonprofit here in Dallas, Minnie's Food Pantry, and it is run by a powerhouse named Cheryl Jackson. And she manifested Oprah speaking at her event. Every year at her event, she would have a place card that said Oprah Winfrey.
Oh my
She would
gosh.
slide into Oprah's DMs and she'd say, "Our event's on such and such a date, and I'm holding you a place." And she'd send her the empty seat for 5, 6, 7 years. And finally, Oprah came, didn't charge her a dime. And I got to go to that event and it was pure magic. And I wish I could have booked Oprah for some clients to have experienced what I experienced at that event,
Yeah.
particularly the fundraising component, because she's a genius. She
Yeah.
said, "We're going to raise some money tonight for Minnie's Food Pantry. And if you want to donate, I'd like for you to get over here, get in line, and I want you to come up to the microphone and I want you to tell this entire crowd how much money you're donating, and then I'm going to take my picture with you." Well, of course, I wasn't going to miss out on that. And I'm walking up there and I'm thinking $1,000 sounds pretty good, but I end up behind Emmett Smith and 1,000 started to sound kind of cheap. So, I mean, I got my picture with Oprah and I went broke that same night. It was kind of funny.
Well, it was for the food pantry. My
It was
husband
for
and
the
I are
food pantry.
notorious for going to auctions, having a few drinks, and buying a trip to, maybe we just recently bought one to Ireland. I don't know.
Yeah.
We also bought a Kentucky Derby to jet to the Derby ones. Like,
Oh, I came home with a Lexus once. I know what you're talking about.
have you ever bought a puppy? We have not.
No.
But
Well, you know I have my sweet dog, but not
I
at a charity auction.
I know. The puppies go for like 15, $20,000.
Oh man.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, well I mean I could talk to you for hours, but this is International Women's History Month. Your story is just so great because I think there's so many women of all ages who think I want to start a business. I want to do my own thing, and most of them don't do it, I believe, out of fear, just, of like, what if it doesn't work out? What if I lose money? What if people are going to think I'm crazy? And I will tell you, as someone who started a couple businesses, I had one that didn't work out after I'd put a decent amount of money into it. The pandemic, it was an online training, and we had an online training and community. Well, you can imagine that as soon as the pandemic rolled around, people were like, the last thing I want to do is be part of another online community. Like, you know,
Yeah.
it didn't work out. But I also have a theory that it not working out always works out, because at that point in time, it was like, this is actually opening up the space for me to get my book done, to do all the stuff
Right.
with this message. Um, but I always, and I remind my audiences of like, if you're fearful, if you're feeling fear and anxiety, I believe it's like one of the first signs that you're on the right track, because we don't get scared about stuff that we don't care about. And it just shows how there's something inside of you that probably has a gift of, it has, something that you need to do. But what would you tell these women who are like, I want to start something, but I have no idea how to do it, and I'm mostly afraid of it not working out and failing?
I think community is a really important thing wherever you find it. For me, it's been two really key places, and now a third, I would add a third. But the first was the International Association of Speakers Bureaus. As crazy as it sounds, it's a group of competitors who get together and realize they're really colleagues, and they would take their shirt off their back for you to lend you a hand and help you. And I would not have made it through the pandemic without my standard calls that were set up with industry leaders where we were helping each other find our way. So that community, being a part of that, I've been president of ISB. Those are my people. I wouldn't miss that conference if I had to, and it's just such a supportive group. In terms of being a business leader, so they teach me about my industry. In terms of being a business leader, EO, the Entrepreneur Organization, it's like YPO, except you need to be the founder of your company. So you have to be the one who came up with the idea and started your company. So when you get around a lot of people, it doesn't matter if they own a glass manufacturing company or, a placement service.
Right.
In the Speakers Bureau, we all have the same problems: hiring good people, keeping good people. How do you compensate people? How do you get ERC money from the government? I mean, and being around other business owners has really, and they're so real. They'll talk about their failures. So
Right.
every business owner I know has failed. So if somebody is listening to this and they say, "I think I have a great idea, but I might fail," welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Everybody has failed. So being around other people that are willing to share where they had a misstep and tell you, "Hey, it's really going to be okay," and not be afraid to fail, because like you said a minute ago, and it's so true. Every time it doesn't work out, it's just setting you up for it to knock it out of the park. You
Yeah.
know, I had a
Yeah.
difficult conversation with a client earlier this year where, we put one speaker up on the stage that didn't work, and it was an unpleasant conversation. I hated every minute of it. But after I got through it, I realized we needed to tighten our process. You cannot take a long term client for granted. So we tightened up our process, and we're going to be better than we've ever been for that client. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I always think those open up opportunities to really wow the clients. I always said like some of my most loyal clients when I worked in sales and sales leadership were people that maybe they had had a little tumble with customer service or something wasn't right, and we were able to go in and be like, "Hey, tell us what's going on," and then make it right. And I think when you have that opportunity and you've built that trust, it can
yeah.
make a huge difference. Now, I think Sarah Blakely, she's in a EO, right?
She
Doesn't
is.
she
She's
talk
in
about
EO
that?
Atlanta, and
Yeah.
she and Jesse did a virtual event once for EO, which was really fun. That's what the James Clear event was this morning. And that's really a cool thing that came out of the pandemic. EO is a global organization, so they can invest in bringing on people like James Clear, Sarah, and Jesse. And people from all over can tune in, and the chat's open, and you can ask questions. So, you know, that's a good thing that came out of the pandemic. We never did things like that before the pandemic, and now it's
Yeah.
something that no one wants to lose.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. I love Sarah Blakely. She's one of
I
my
do too.
faves. Who's another, just wrapping out Women's History Month? Who are a couple women? And by the way, I love you and your mom. If you guys don't follow Gail, you need to follow her and her mom. I'm like, I want to go on trips with you. I told you the other day, I was like, I think you and your mom need your own show. Like, we just need it.
Yes.
We need the show of, I mean, the clothing. You guys are just knockout, gorgeous, well dressed, always doing something amazing. I'm like, are they in, Belize or a jazz concert tonight? I don't know, but I'm going to find out as I'm sitting here, hanging out with
I
all
have
the
to
boys.
hear when you're going to Ireland, because I told her I'd take her to Ireland next year for her birthday, so we might have to end up there at the same time.
Okay, I would love that.
Oh, that would be so fun. Okay, I would like to think I am Brene Brown's biggest fan. I feel like when I read a book written by Brene or when I listen to a podcast, I am just convinced that I'm her best friend and that she wrote that particular story just for me. So I think she has, oh my gosh, I just think she's the all time best. And I do have the pleasure of having booked her and worked with her, and she's just as good on side as you
She
want her to
is.
be or imagine her to be. So I love, love, love her. I love Allison Levine.
I love
She
Allison.
is,
Did you know that
yeah.
Allison and I are friends?
Well, does that surprise
Oh
me?
my
I
gosh.
mean,
Well, she's got a kick-ass story. I
she's
mean,
amazing, and she's so quick-witted. I'm sure you know. Do you know about the dinner party after her first attempt at Everest in San Francisco?
I don't know if I know this
It's
story.
a good Women's History Month story. So basically, she led this team to go to Everest, and people do not die climbing up Everest, they die coming down.
Right.
They were almost to the top. I mean, within feet, maybe. I mean, 100 feet, 100 yards. I don't know. They can
And the
see the
storm
top.
came in.
And the storm comes in, and she makes the decision as the leader to turn around. So she's at a dinner party in San Francisco, and someone introduced her. This is my friend Allison. She climbed Everest. And this guy goes, "Oh, what was the summit like?" And she said, "Well, honestly, weather came in. We didn't make it to the summit. We were within, 5 feet, 10 feet, whatever the answer was." And he goes, "Oh, so you didn't really climb it."
I
Without
have
missing a, without
I would
missing a
punch
beat,
him in the
she's
face
like,
probably.
where do you work? And no offense to JP Morgan, I'm just gonna make that up. I think that's where it was, but he's like, JP Morgan. She goes, "Oh, are you the CEO?" And he goes, "Well, no." And she goes, "Oh, so you don't really work there." Woo! She's our gal.
And
We
by the
love her.
way, she did go back and do it all
Yes,
over
she did.
again.
She certainly did.
I though as much as I love her, I have a fear of heights, and her keynote gives me literally height anxiety. When she's, like, going over
Oh,
that ice cliff, I'm like, "Oh my god, I can't watch." I
yeah,
can't
it is
even believe that
pretty.
she did that.
I can't either. I can't either.
I mean,
She's
she
great.
is a badass, and
She is.
she is so fun, and she's so funny, like, I just we're
There's so
fangirling you.
many. Erica Dewan, Robin Benincasa, your pal Judy Holler. I mean,
Yes,
there's just so many amazing female speakers out there, I think.
there really are, and
Molly Fletcher. Molly's great. Carla Harris. Oh, there's so many.
And Gail, and you've played such a strategic role in all of our stories and all of our success. So I just have loved having you on. Is there anything else that you want to add or leave or anything before? Oh, we should talk real quick, by the way, just because this is, women and we're talking. Let's talk about your favorite fashion designers because I know we share a few. Gail's
Yes.
very well dressed.
Well, thank you. Well, we both love Veronica Beard.
We love Veronica Beard, which is a great female story.
Yes,
And you know
yes.
what? We have to tell the listeners because most of them probably don't know that Veronica Beard are actually two Veronicas. And what are
Married
the
to,
chances that they married brothers? So
that's
these two
right.
guys both married girls named Veronica. So Veronica Beard is their, and I just think,
Yes.
and they set out to make a clothing brand for working women that was fashionable but comfortable and stylish. And I just think it's such a cool story.
And then, of course, you mentioned Sarah earlier.
We love Sarah.
Don't we, though?
Yes.
Oh,
Sarah.
boy. We do. We do. Vince. I love the Vince store.
I love Vents. My husband wears more Vents than I do.
Hmm.
Yeah,
No, no. You and I actually have a very hysterical story.
we do.
Do we dare?
I mean, I'm down for telling it because this is what Women's
It's
History
what
Month is
women
really all
do.
about, which is about we have each other's back when
Hmm.
we need it most.
So,
That's
how
what
well
women
did
do.
I know you when this happened?
We knew of each other. I had done several GDA events, but
Hmm.
I had only met you like maybe once or twice. I had worked with a bunch of,
Hmm.
the GDA
Hmm.
gals. Um,
Well, people are always asking you, how do you get in with the bureau? Well, let me tell you, Tara nailed it. So we're in Detroit, right?
we're in Detroit, yes.
And I noticed we both had the same Veronica Beard sneakers on, so that we noticed that. And we just had a couple of, we had a couple of connections on
We
clothing.
did.
And I'm supposed to, she was on stage in the morning and I was supposed to be on stage in the afternoon. And I realized that the zipper on my pants, the zipper was, it just wasn't tracking right, I guess is the way you want
It
to
was
say that.
malfunctioning.
It was malfunctioning. And so I find a safety pin and that is not working. So I just look at Tara and I go, we need to go to Veronica Beard. And she goes, I don't really think they have one here. I was like, well, then we need to go to Nordstrom. And we look it up and it was 17 miles away. And she's like, what are you trying to solve? And I go, I'm worried about these pants. I don't think they're going to make it through the day. And you were like, well, I've got this. And you grabbed your suitcase and I had a selection of, I think I ended up with Spanx jeans, right?
Those Spanx jeans, I'm telling you,
I
they are the
mean,
cutest jeans.
oh my gosh, it like transformed my outfit. I felt so cute. And you were like, oh, just mail them back to me. 5 minutes later, I send her a text and I go, there's only one problem. I don't want to return them.
Oh my god. I was dying. So we're in the bathroom. Oh, by the way, you were gonna throw your pants in the trash, the ones with the zipper. I'm like, "Gail, do not throw those pants away. Like, go take them to the tailor and get that zipper that's malfunctioning
You know,
fixed."
it, once I got home, it just had a little
You
thread
were
in.
so frustrated. You were, like, pissed. You're like, "I mean, I don't know, man." And so she messages me and she's like, "I mean, I don't like, I'm loving these jeans. Where did you get them?" And I'm like, "Well, let me see if I can find them." And do you know, I couldn't find him on the site, and I'm just telling you, this is how serendipitous this whole thing was that I start digging through my emails. I'm like, "Okay, what account did I order these through?" I finally find the email receipt. I click the jeans. It takes me somewhere on the Spanx site. There's one pair somehow in my exact size, our size, sorry, Gail, our size. And I was like, "Holy shit, I can order these." And so I told you, I was like, "I'm gonna have them shipped to you." You're like, you go, "No, I'll just keep these." I'm like, "Don't you want the fresh new pair?" You're like, "No." I'm like, "Well, okay." And I mean, it was so meant to be.
Oh, but now it's like the joke of the century. The other bureaus show up and they're like, Tara, are you going to give me pants?
Yeah.
I mean, like best friends. So there's a tip from the top. If you're a speaker out there and you want to get in touch with
Well,
a
what
bureau
are the
owner,
odds that we would have been the same size, that it all worked out? And I mean, I did. Gail tried those pants and I'm like, "Those actually look amazing on you." Like, and they are.
yeah,
They're the jeans that just keep on giving. They're tailored enough that they're not like a true blue jean. They're more of like a denim
got
pant.
like that pleat down the front.
And they're comfortable as hell. They're so
Yeah,
cute. Well, we gotta make
yeah.
sure I know. And yes, now everyone asks me. I was at an event in California and Jeff Bigelow actually comes up to me. He's like, "I gotta ask you." He's like, I'm supposed to ask you if you have a pair of pants I can borrow." And of course, someone else put him up for it. He's like, "I'm worried that I should be even asking you this." And I was like, "Oh my God. Let me tell you." He's like, "You have to tell me the story." I
It's
was like,
classic. It's classic.
so,
So much fun. So
but
much
you
fun.
know what? I think it's a great story to round out this because this is what women do for each other. We have each other's back. And I think when women come together, we realize that there is enough success for all of us, that no one's like you were talking about, these colleagues, these people who are actually competitors have been and same with me, just other speakers. It's like there's enough success for all of us. And when we come together, we are truly better together. So,
We are.
well, Gail, I just adore you. You are an amazing woman. You are a mom that I just admire. You're a boy mom. And I know you've got all these little grand girls now. So,
Grandson too. Two granddaughters and one grandson.
yes, but you got the little girls, which, I told you, I was like, I've got the boys. I'm like, and I know
Yeah,
for a fact, I'm like, "Oh, I guarantee you both of these boys are gonna have little girls because it's all gonna come back,"
yeah.
you
It's so
know?
fun. I've got to get you to Dallas and we'll do a drive by there, then we'll go shopping.
Yes,
Yeah,
with
I love
Lexi.
it.
We've got
Yes.
plans have been made, okay? We might end up in Ireland, I don't
I
know, but
know. Oh my gosh, it'll be so much fun. We're thinking April of next year.
okay. Well, I mean, crazier things have happened. What we should do is
Things have
just get a
happened.
gig over there, and then we can, make it a business expense.
I love it. Okay, I'll work on
Yeah.
that.
Well, Gail, thank you so much for being on the Be Who You Came to Be podcast, inspiring so many people to, share their passions and purpose and connecting the right speaker with the right audience. I think that, so many times people don't know what happens behind the scenes, and what you created and what you've done has truly changed. We're going to do the math on the 7,500 and try to figure out if we can come up with an exact number, but then even the trajectory of that, of people who've told people about the messages they've heard. I mean, it's a really wide, beautiful swath that you've cut through the world and changing lives with the right messages. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
All right. Tune in again. We've got more great guests, more great episodes coming up. And if there's anything specific that you would love to see on the Be Who You Came to Be podcast, let us know. I will try to get Oprah, but I cannot make any promises. So until we chat again, keep shining, live unapologetically authentic, and be who you came to be.